Here we are given another proportion. Remember, a proportion is a fraction equal to a fraction. Proportions are easy to solve. All you have to do is remember corners equals corners. Corners equals corners. Okay, so I'm just going to take these two corners, I'm going to multiply and times each other. X times x is x squared. Corners equals corners. I'm going to take the quantity x plus 4 and multiply it times 2. This particular problem is going to have an extra twist in it because it's going to end up being a quadratic, not a linear equation. Quadratic equation means it has an x squared in it. A linear equation means the highest power of x is a 1. Okay, let's do a little more simplifying here. This is x squared equals, we need to distribute, don't forget about all these step guys, equals 2x plus 8. Okay, if you look at this and you may say, holy cow, what do I solve here? The reason why it looks a little funny too is you need to remember if there's an x squared in there, it's a quadratic. And we taught you a couple different ways to solve quadratic. Sometimes you could solve quadratics using a radical or taking a square root. Most of the time, you solve quadratics using factoring. So I want you, if you see a quadratic and they're asking you to solve, in your head you should think factoring, 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 because that's what you need to do. So I'm going to take this problem and I'm going to get everything on one side. So I'm going to subtract 2x from this side. I'm going to do two steps in once here, so don't get lost here. I'm also going to subtract 8. Because what that does is it gives me this problem now. X squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. Okay, hopefully you can look at this and you can see exactly how I got over here. I just algebraically manipulated things, no big deal. So here I have my quadratic, it is set equal to 0. I can now factor. This is actually one of the easier ones to factor because the coefficient of the squared term is a 1. So I don't have to do the m and n method, I can just go straight to my parentheses. Remember, when you're factoring a quadratic, that's a second power, you're going to end up with an answer that's in these kind of parentheses here, and you're going to have 4 different pieces to fill in. The only way to get an x squared is x times x. Those are the two easiest pieces to put in. Now I have to ask myself a question. I need two numbers that multiply to give me negative 8, but add to give me negative 2, right here, okay? I don't have to write out that long m and n method on this one because the coefficient of this is 1, so this is the faster one. Okay, so I need some numbers to multiply to give me negative 8. And remember, pay attention to signs, because if you don't, you'll get it wrong. The signs are super important. Like one way to get negative 8 is negative 8 times 1. Well, adding those together is not going to give me negative 2, so I'm just going to throw that out the window. How about 4 times negative 2? Well, when I multiply them, I do get negative 8. Awesome. But when I add them, I don't get negative 2. So that should lead you to the conclusion that you probably should just switch the signs here. And if you use negative 4 and positive 2, you're set. Those multiply to give you negative 8 and they add to give you negative 2. So I'll come in here and always put a plus sign, but if it's a negative, you're going to have to put a negative right here, okay? So that's a negative 4 and that's a 2. Well, great, I just factored this quadratic, but it didn't say factor the quadratic, it said solve. That's why it's equal to 0. So you need to go ahead and remember that zero product property, even if you don't remember the name when I said it. You need to remember what to do next. And what to do next, it says, once you are fully factored, and every piece in there is factored, you're saying this times this gives you 0 as an answer. The only way that can happen is if this piece is equal to 0, or this piece is equal to 0, or they're both equal to 0. So when it's fully factored, that's when I can take each piece and set it equal to 0 and solve for x. If I solve for x in this one, I'd add 4 to both sides and I'd get x equals 4. And to solve for x in this one, I'd subtract 2 from both sides and I'd get x equals negative 2. So this is a really important problem because it pulls together a couple different issues. It pulls together 3 algebra skills. It pulls together solving a proportion, it pulls together solving a proportion, it pulls together being able to work with an equation, it pulls together factoring, and it pulls together solving equations using the zero product property. And I don't mean to keep moving that around. So lots of stuff in that one.